Good day, people. Good day. How are you? It is Thursday. It is the 1st of June. Summer is here. Welcome, Rex.
Hello,
Thanks for
good to be
joining
here.
us on stage. Hi. Hi. Right on. We're going to get started. Gregory's going to join us in a minute here. We've got some other friends out there. Hey, Big Green, want to give you a shout. You guys have been doing some great Twitter content on educating around all the stuff in the voluntary carbon market space and beyond. Very appreciative of that. Ed and Jade, good to see you, Howard. We didn't get a chance to chat, but it was nice to see you from far in Seattle. Awesome. So I think today we're gonna cover a couple areas. We're gonna spend a chunk of time, kind of reviewing our time together in Seattle at ReFi Summit. That was quite a time in year two. I think there may be some discussion around Wilbur Hot Springs. There's a gathering of some regenerates there and some lofty ideas laid out. Just to bring you up on a couple things. Again, my name is Dave Fortson. I'm with Regen Network Development for many years now as a longtime partner, also CEO of Loa Labs. We're integrated marketing and a product firm for Better World Blockchain. Super happy to be here. I was also the MC and moderator at the second annual ReFi Summit. So all kinds of hats I've got on this morning, and yeah, excited to give you a kind of an expose of what happened on the inside of ReFi Summit this past week. Most of us just are kind of landed back safely in our homes. And I guess first I just want to give a big shout to Rex in particular as the visionary around this, and Jeff, who is his right hand, who just works his butt off to bring this summit to everybody, and really puts on puts on a great show. And I was maybe going to start with a reflection on year one. Year one, I think in a lot of ways, regenerative finance was quite new. It was buzzy. I think in May of last year, we were just, Terra was exploding literally while we were at the summit, Terra Luna. And we were in a lot of ways at the beginning of the bear, which has been very firmly entrenched over the course of the past year. But last year, I think, was a little bit more buzzy. Yeah, I'd say a little bit more frothy in a way, where for me at least, and it was the first year. People are getting to know each other. There are a lot of, there are a lot of DAOs that weren't DAOs. There were a lot of discussion of what could be, and which I think, frankly, was pretty indicative of the regenerative finance space in Web3, which I don't think is unusual. And yeah, and it was not even a critique at all, but just more of an observation. And for me this year felt, even though the numbers were the same, if not a few more people there, it felt more tempered, more realistic, frankly, a little bit more grown up. As the space has evolved, it felt like there was significant there was a significant number more like building like products that were either in market or near market, which was exciting to see. I think again indicative of a year under our belts, and also it's clear that a lot of the kind of more early stage folks. Some weren't there. I think some have moved on, and I think some of the more established teams were still moving ahead pretty strongly, even in a relatively tough market conditions. But I think for me, generally, as always, the most enlivening parts were the deep conversations and the social time we had together, the long walks from the venue to the house, sipping a beer, drinking or eating some food together, and just digging in, building those relationships that we maintain digitally, but are frankly can be hard to build digitally. That really get solidified when we just get together. As I think I started my kind of opening remarks, we really are better when we're together. To steal from my old friend Jack Johnson. So anyhow, that's just like kind of maybe to start us off. I'm inviting Gregory up here, but Rex, maybe do you want to give a kind of, yeah, maybe I'd be curious to get a reflection a year ago to today, and just how you saw a change or some growth. What was different around ReFi Summit this year?
Yeah, I've been actually having a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs over the last couple days and last week, and it's weirdly everybody's actually on the same page, going through the same things at the same time, which has been really interesting to see. So I think we have to rewind back to what happened last year. I mean, once again, or a year before, it was like coming out of COVID, which hit the reset button on absolutely everyone's life and career and all the technology and all the lifestyle. Like, and then it's just, we came in, did ReFi Summit, and that was a period when everybody had been separated and like decide they want to go on a, quite honestly, change careers, like change their life, change the technology, and they'd only interacted with each other virtually. So I think last year was all about just like meeting each other for the first time, and then obviously the crypto market imploded, having a lot of conversations. And kind of what we'd predicted with this ReFi summit is I thought that all the technologies from ReFi would begin having a developer or programmatic or solutions focus. And we started to see that at this ReFi summit because it was the first time we started having like hands-on workshops, because it's one thing to say, okay, we have this, Web3 enabled technology to do X, Y, and Z, but it's like, well, you need APIs, to do it programmatically, to spread it through an ecosystem, to make it infrastructure, carbon offsets that are easily accessible via programming interfaces. Same with AI. We had an AI workshop. So this is getting hands-on and more solutions focused, it feels like. But I think there's something else in the room, and I have to say, what it is I think everybody is hitting a pivot point right now where they have to redesign their whole business effectively, like pull apart all the pieces and be like, okay, we threw a lot of stuff at the wall last year, and a lot of things are no longer true. Like when your coins are jumping around, like you can get away with like a lot of stuff, but all the water's been removed from the pool, and it's like, yeah, we got to go back to pretty raw basics. And I think the conversations I'm having a lot is people will come to me and I'll pull apart their business and redesign it and like their lifestyle back into it. And I'm interested in that. Like what happens when the liquidity is removed from crypto is you're left with, just a regular boring business. And then you have to kind of redesign that in a new way and rethink that. And I think there's a lot of that happening right now. So I'm quite interested in that trend.
Gregory, any reflections there? I mean, I can share a quick thought. I mean, one, I think it's an astute observation. I was actually appreciating just your discernment around, when the liquidity squeezed out, and I keep getting this like sponge analogy of literally the past year has been this like somewhat slow but very consistent uh, smashing of the or twisting of the ringing, if the right word, of the sponge and squeezing out the liquidity really across Web3, and that regardless of whether you were exposed to FTX or Terra Luna or otherwise, it really does hit all of our bottom lines, and it's required in a lot of ways a wringing out of the companies that have been involved in Web3, including regenerative finance, as VC capital and venture capital has become a little bit more gun shy, and token prices have decreased dramatically. But in some ways, or in many ways, I think there's this kind of more sober realism is going to create a more resilient and more uh, just a stronger foundation from which to grow over the course of the next 24 months. Is the feeling I'm getting. Again, maybe it's a little bit of hopium, but I'd be
I,
curious to get some
I want
reflections
to
there.
weigh in on the effect that it's had, at least in the gaming market. So it's like going, last year, if we went to NFT New York, I mean, there's huge gaming crypto floor at NFT New York City. Like these crypto events were super thriving. And this year, I'd say starting in ETH Denver and Consensus, it was a little lighter. And when the investment pulls out, you saw like there's less net new product formation. And what's interesting is seeing that like going to GDC with the Game Developer Conference, that event was doing fantastic. And then you go to Consensus and you're like, well, it's a little lighter on games this year. It's like a little smaller, a little fewer new projects. And I think what's happening now is if like regrounding this to a crypto native audience, a ReFi native audience, like I think the move to make now is to try and be the one that crosses the chasm. It's like rather than doing the crypto gaming activations at the crypto conference, you want to do that at the gaming conference, not the crypto conference. So in ReFi, that would mean taking the message to the existing climate, existing climate expos, existing climate market, institutional climate markets, because like by itself, like crypto plus climate, it's a niche, and with FTX and everything, that niche is a little smaller. So I think it's a good time to cross the chasm, is my feeling overall.
Gregory, welcome to the stage. Be curious to get kind of your reflection on a year ago to today, the kind of the movement you've seen, the temperature check. What's moving for you as you're hearing this?
Good morning. Hey, Rex. Hey, David. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I certainly left ReFi Summit feeling pretty optimistic, which wasn't actually how I went into it.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in the midst of a pretty, of a I mean, unprecedented uncertainty and lots of emotional ups and downs. I mean, gosh, it's been a roller coaster between last year's ReFi Summit and this year's ReFi Summit. I mean, last year, Terra Luna collapse happened during the summit. This year, we got to sort of, one Rez from Solid World DAO gave everybody a sort of like 101 primer for why the tokenomics collapsed. So it's just to say, what gave me hope was the amount of learning that I had experienced, and I was witnessing other people experiencing, sharing about, and then up leveling, and kind of there was a really significant maturation, it felt like, amongst the people who were there. So I think that's what my hope was rooted in, is that yeah, there's a lot of learning taking place. And as Rex was saying, at the end of the day, we have to answer a lot of pretty hard questions in order to create sustainable vocations and the right unit economics at the base of regenerative finance. Like, people's lives just have to be working. We can't get away on just like riding a speculative bubble into the sunset. There actually has to be real value exchange and solid relationships and real value being generated, not just extracted or floating just like in a big bubble float. And I think we're moving in that direction. I do think that there's quite a ways to go, and the downside of moments like this is just the scarcity. Scarcity can breed competition, right? Or scarcity can encourage people to collaborate and double down with partners or community members or projects that are sort of are solid enough and open enough and collaborative enough. And so either, I think it's sort of, there's sort of two paths at moments like this, and the relationships that get built and the work that gets done when things aren't in a hype cycle, but instead, we have to really dig down and connect with first principles and then do work, are do end up having massive downstream effects as market cycles shift again. So those are just a few of my thoughts. I'm also, can you all hear me? Just,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, cool. I also want to just call out, as we're chatting about ReFi Summit, before ReFi Summit, a bunch of the Regen team was down in California at Wilbur Hot Springs doing an eco weaving retreat with a bunch of amazing folks. And I see Samantha here and Yin's here. There may be some others. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to hop up and just chat. Just overview of that gathering. It was quite a bit smaller than ReFi Summit and really focused on some very interesting inquiries about how to support indigenous communities in the Amazon, and like using that as a case study for um, how to be thinking about the tools, the technology, the financial applications, and kind of grow capability as allies. So it had a very interesting connection. My experience is very interesting between the two different gatherings. ReFi Summit was, a lot more technically focused, although there was some pretty heavy technical lifting going on the in the process there at the Eco Weaving gathering. But I think there was a significant, some of the significant differences is there was a lot more kind of like legal engineering, first principles conversation going on at Eco Weaving about what are right relationships between actors, and we had some of those conversations at ReFi Summit, but it was just a little less active. So I'm just making it, contextualizing that and making an invitation if folks from that side of the community want to hop up and chat, you're very welcome to. I'll pause there and see Rex and Dave what you want to add in.
Dave's been Twitter rugged. He like we can't hear him talk. By the way, so Greg and I will lead the space from now on. Unfortunately, because if he logs off, he has to kill the space. So yeah,
Uh-oh.
yeah.
I am a co-host, so
Yeah.
he might be able to log off and log
Okay.
back on.
Okay.
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
maybe
know
I
how
could try.
Twitter does that.
Yeah. So yeah, like the different types of events. I mean, we had a little more technical workshops, sure, and hands-on portions, and I'd like to see that part grow because like the work that someone like Regen Network is doing in the Cosmos ecosystem, combined with the work of Dan Lynch from Cosmology. So what Cosmology has done is they've built some simple interfaces to make it easy to interact with Cosmos tokens on the front end, such as pulling in Regen network tokens and programmatically interacting with that, like using potentially carbon offsets as a universal kind of currency across different chains. And like that programmatic approach makes a lot of sense to me because that's my whole background is developer relations, and coming in here to ReFi like that, I've been looking for that piece to develop. And you see things like Stripe, they've spent a lot of time like forming relationships that allow you to automatically offset carbon as part of your checkout flow. Like I kind of see these offset tokens being used in that way, and the developer experience piece being like a leading go to market in that a way to scale to get to more applications. You could imagine maybe one day it's like Shopify has like plugins to enable any Shopify store owner to use Regen tokens in their checkout experience somehow. So I kind of like see a future like that, and I don't know if that's ever going to come true, but that was my reasoning for doing those kinds of workshops. Um, so yeah, any comment, Greg, or maybe just if people we open it up and let people talk that came to ReFi Summit, like talk with or your event, like just talk about what their perspective is. I think it would be interesting to hear from people.
I'm just having a pause. I see several folks who are at ReFi. You're welcome to come up. Howard, you're welcome to come up if you want. Also welcome to just listen. We can keep chatting, but feel free to chat. I think, I definitely feel at this stage of, I don't know if we call what we're doing an industry or a movement, but anyway, at this stage of what is emerging, I think in-person time and a variety of different types of in-person time is really important, because the level of kind of like thought and engagement and cross-pollination um, that's needed to orient and build is, I think, best achieved with in-person time. I also, though, there's a hazard, right, around events. And there's also sort of like the dark side of the event scene is that lots of people just like go from event to event and not that much work gets done. So there's sort of like this very interesting dichotomy where in some cases we get these sort of, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of flagging that there are and you spoke about this, about elements of this at ReFi Summit in your closing, Rex, but so there's an emerging community of digital
Yep.
nomads and people building the network state, and there's all of this work to get done. There's also just a lot of the hazard or risk is that we end up creating kind of a superficial sort of like event scene culture, but not a lot of deep work is getting done. Um, it's an interesting tension. I'd love to hear you comment on that a little bit, Rex, just as far as you were sort of calling out the trend of digital nomadism and people moving between events and maybe
Yeah.
belonging to Cabin DAO or forming new online and like live work communities. But where are there examples of that balance between the depth of connection and inquiry and community and rebuilding new communities that are focused on, in our case, let's just anchor it, focused on regenerative outcomes, planetary regeneration, using finance, money, technology, AI to achieve ecological and social regeneration. I think that's the context we're talking about. Do you see good examples of corners of that movement that are really nailing the balance between creating in-person spaces for inquiry around the ethos and praxis of all of this, and also just like getting shit done and piloting and prototyping and building? Do you see evidence that there's balance, or are we still iterating towards that
It
balance?
feels like we're in the process of redesigning like everything, like from a community, ecosystem, business, strategy, technology, learning, living, like absolutely
But
everything is.
can
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
interrupt for a
yeah.
sec? To what degree is us reinventing everything what is called in software development circles um, yak shaving? Like,
So all right. So I'm kind of like, all right,
yeah.
I'm just see all these threads. So like, I think we're seeing a second iteration of a cycle that maybe started in like even the 1960s. Like my sister went to Africa with like, is it? I can't remember what it's called. Is it Mercy Corps, or is it like where you go and you like live on some island or you work with some community and you stay there for a while and they give you projects and like it's kind of meant to internationalize Americans, and like it was like a John F. Kennedy thing. It's like you go and perform service for other people as an American, then you come back. And like that kind of thread, I don't know if it's been that popular for a long time, but I could see that coming back in this digital nomad form with Cabin DAO. And maybe I think like the word service, like some of these older terms like service and citizenship, like you never hear people saying stuff like this anymore, but it's like the word service is like pretty relevant because it's like you take ReFi and you add it to what's happening with Cabin DAO, which is kind of like an evolution of what Airbnb did. It's like a sharing economy. but now you can rent like, a place in, you can become a subscription to a network city that lets you go to these different nature locations. And it seems like the missing piece there is that service component of actually not just being a digital nomad there, but also somehow enriching the environment while you're there. So I think that seems to be a growth area. I don't know that much about Cabin DAO, but it seems like that thread is somehow has the potential to come back here, and maybe that's the
I don't
direction you're
actually
going.
know that much about. I actually don't know that much about Cabin DAO, but I know that Cabin DAO. There's Embassy Network. There are an Embassy is way older and non Web3, right? But was one of the big sort of like part of the community that we were having a fantastic time interacting with and evolving thinking at the Eco Weaving gathering. Yeah, I mean, I think service is right, a really important thing to evoke. The other thing that's coming to my mind in this conversation is I've just been holding this inquiry really over the last couple of years, but it's peaked over the last month or so around whatever happened to mutual aid societies. What happened to, what is our generation's version of the Elks Lodge or GASP, like organizations like the Masons or the Odd Fellows, and centering in on Odd Fellows, for instance, because I know a little bit about the history of the Odd Fellows in the United States. Odd Fellows was created by working class men to create a mutual aid society. Basically, they were insuring each other. So they paid membership dues, but then, it was created in a time when blue collar labor was very dangerous. And there was no such thing as,
Interesting.
life
Interesting.
insurance. And there was no such thing as, there was all these social safety net gaps, and people came together and they created a mutual aid society. They pooled resources, and then if a member died, they would take care of the widow and the kids. I think that was one of the primary sort of like, just like primary utilities that was being provided by the members. But then, of course, I think probably they were also sort of engaging and talking about politics and having social gatherings and, like just all of the other layers of things. And I can't help wonder, what is the analog? Are DAOs our generation's analog of these mutual aid societies? And if so, what could we be learning? And how do these types of events like ReFi Summit and other places where we're coming together in affinity groups, where different people, like at ReFi Summit, there are competitors, nominally competitors, but we're all working on the same problem set. So we're embedded. What we're really doing is competing with a degenerative, extractive, broken, a paradigm of societal organization and economics, but also we're competing against each other for scarce time, attention, resources, and approaches. So anyway, at what places do we try to think about these questions of, as you're saying, service, where we're coming together to specifically serve a region or a location or a community, and our own mutual aid, where we're sort of committing to support and engagement over, competition. So
I'm
just a few
so I'm
thoughts.
just I'm like because my thing is like ecosystem. So it's like, over the last 15 years I built, ecosystem, like 12, 15 ecosystems with thousands of projects, and I just go to events, and I experience events very differently than other people, I think, because I feel the energy above all. Like I almost don't even listen to people. Like I just feel the energy in the room, and that's how I go. So like listening to what you just said, there's some very important like details there. Like here's the thing. I found myself lately looking at literature that is 50 years or older ago, like, whether it be personal development or like philosophy. Like I don't find much use in any of the modern literature, and I'm kind of the fact that you brought up the Oddfellows analogy is fascinating, because I think if you rewind 150 years about why the Oddfellows happen and why those kinds of societies happen, and then why that seems to want to happen right now, it seems like we're in like almost like a proto country state right now. And that is making those analogies suddenly relevant. So studying those situations where a nascent country is beginning to form a structure and how those structures evolved over time, and you nailed it. You're like, things start getting real when a group starts talking about forming their own health insurance and retirement. That's when things like really get real in terms of like a civilization, country developing of sorts. And when I look at the Cosmos ecosystem, here's an example: 75 projects distributed internationally. How come this group of projects? I call it a federated ecosystem. When's the point when this group of projects starts negotiating bulk healthcare internationally or adding a doctor network? That's when it gets real. So I think like that thread about like coming to the realization that actually nobody's coming to solve this problem, and it's something that will come out of this group of people waking up and realizing that it's a form of proto country or society, like the Oddfellows, as you said. And I can't comment on the competitive piece. Any comment on that? I didn't answer your whole question. I was just getting triggered by your Oddfellows analogy. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm curious, you know, you can't comment on the competitive piece or you won't comment on the competitive piece. Like to what degree is competition important and healthy in ecosystem building in your experience? And to what degree is it counterproductive? And at what
I
level?
think in all markets tend to follow a Pareto distribution where there's a top number one that gets 80% or 75%, and the number two gets the rest, and the number three gets hardly anything left. And that tends to always happen. And in like in a market like ReFi, I mean, like people are gonna have to change their position. It's like I come in here doing my summit, and then Flow Carbon's doing their summit, and like their Flow Carbon's doing theirs at ETH Denver, and like I'm doing like a standalone one. It's like, well, yeah, I have to rethink how I design my event because people just went to the Flow Carbon summit at Consensus. I'm not going to have all the same speakers because why would you go to both? So that forces you to design around your competition and design something unique. And I think as the market fills up, then you have to constantly design your position against your competitors, and that's going to force you to get clear about what you're good at and what you're able to do versus what they are good at and what they're able to do. And maybe the role of the events is to help you figure that out faster. It's like a natural process.
Yeah, interesting. One thing I was struck by at ReFi Summit, I found very interesting was um, we did an ad hoc. So Corey from the R&D Public Benefit Corp team, the core software team that's been building Regen Network software, did we he did a little demo, and it was kind of ad hoc, last minute, got thrown up on the dry erase board as a demo during lunch. And I think over half the summit participants were like gathered around the screen there. And that was in really, and I don't want to, like name shame or anything, but that was in stark contrast to the other demos that took place. The other demos, I think maximum participation was like 5 people. Um, and our demo had like, yeah, I don't know, 40 people maybe around. And I was surprised and super excited by that. Like there was something there that was really um, interesting to me. Like both, to not be the one giving it and to have people leaning in and being interested in this technical edge that we were sharing around specifically, how do you use the data module and the credit module to create to sort of combine claims and data proofs, use that in either a fully transparent or a zero knowledge way, and have that lead to credit minting. And there was just like so much interest in that. So I'm really like taking a step back, and I was thinking, what does that mean about Regen's positioning or the tools, or like how we're thinking about the serving the community of actors, like what is our role in the midst of this. So it's just a little observation. I don't know if you have any
No,
comments
that
about that,
that's
Rex.
very important sensitivity that you develop over time when you start getting these little hints, and like you have to have had the experience of having like events or activations that weren't so popular, and then when something seems to be resonating, you're like, I'm not quite sure why that is. And so what I did with the ReFi Summit 2 is I just realized that like if I'm going to sit at home and just imagine like what people want at ReFi Summit, like I'm just guessing based on what I see on Twitter. That's not the right approach. So what I did was I organized a town hall where I just sent it to my whole list, and I had like 40 people join, and it was just a group whiteboarding session. And like the magic is in how you run and run the session. Because for me, it's like open product management. I'm like, what did you like about ReFi Summit last year? What do you think is going to be a trend? What do you think should be there more? And like, I got 12 pages of notes from that. I still have it in Notion, and I'm like, I bet that those notes will be relevant for 3 to 5 years. Is my experience, just that data. So if I was a CEO or a product manager, and you saw a result like that, you should do a double tap and try and bring that group in and go and do the town hall session. It's like, hey, what exactly was it about that session? Like, why is that interesting to you? What do you think we should do more of? And then expand on that and do more of that, because apparently there's something that's working there. And you just have to, and like, this is a general comment for everybody in the room. It's like, if you see a hint that something is working, you got to go figure it out and expand on it, and then go get that data from those people, run it as an open town hall session or individually, and then go figure out what exactly is going on there. So that's what I would have done with that data. Ideally, I think in retrospect, the power move would have been for you to interrupt or come in at the end of the session and say, "Hey, can we talk about why everybody came to this? Like, what exactly do you want to get on this? Why is this so interesting?" That would have been an ideal time.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's just like product
Totally.
management fine tuning a little bit there.
Totally. That's a great point. The other thing, so the other, just sort of like learning out loud for me, the other thing that moved for me during the summit was I started to remember, just about community building um, in 20, between 20, I guess like late 2018 and um, late 2020. So for like 2 solid years there, I personally did a huge amount of work. My role at Regen was really like running test nets and community processes and ecosystem building with technical partners, with the validator community. Some of you out there may even remember this era. And at that time, that was the community we most needed to help bootstrap and generate this concept of like public infrastructure for ecological accounting. Just like conjuring it into existence requires people with a high degree of technical capability to run a network, right? And to test that network. And we also remember this was early days of Cosmos, so we were also like pushing the technology forward through that process. There wasn't even like oh, you can just use this off the shelf. It was like, oh, we need to like test every single thing for security and stress test it. That was really fun and really successful on a number of different levels, and actually got us pretty far down the road. And I started remembering, I was like, oh yeah, what would it be like to be building community in a similar way? And who is the community at this moment? And that's actually what I was observing around who was watching that demo. I was like, what are most of the people in the room doing? And I was kind of like doing an informal cataloging. I also am like thinking that as I'm looking at folks who are here in the call, like what are people doing? Where's the interest? Where's the passion? And what emerged for me, and so this is a little bit of alpha for folks in the room, what emerged for me, and I think where we're going to be going and what I'm going to be paying a bunch of attention to over the next probably about 6 months, is running a collaborative and competitive contest for new eco credit creation, novel eco credits, where we build a community of curators, we build a community that wants to pre-invest in the winners of this, and we build a process and use a set of tools for people to just be like iterating new carbon, new biodiversity, new water, new holistic credits. I started sort of like soft pitching that to some of the kind of like project developers and folks focused on things like this, folks like Timo at Basin, folks like Will at Ogallala Life, folks like Will and Paul at Cambium. People were really excited about this idea that and there's different people are going to play different roles, but that we could just be like sprinting together on novel expressions of ecological value using a common set of tools. And like the net win of that, the net value of people learning and growing and learning from each other, but also like sort of the fun, friendly competition, right? And so you heard it here first, folks. I think we're going to start running a little open competition. Maybe we'll launch it in a month or 6 weeks or so. There needs to be a little bit of work to kind of tie it all together. But I think it's going to be really epic, really fun. People got pretty amped. I got pretty amped.
Samantha, you got
Hi.
speakerized.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Gregory, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so excited to hear you'll be working on it and look forward to hearing more. And absolutely, like from my perspective, this is so needed. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Samantha Power. I'm an ecological economist, and I was one of the people that participated in the eco weaving retreat that Gregory mentioned. And since then, we've been continuing to work on some documents and recommendations and mapping out potential paths forward for this group of indigenous communities from the Amazon headwaters. And this has come up again and again, whether there are buyers for the credits that we would be designing that would be aligned with the values and needs of these indigenous communities. And many of us believe that maybe those buyers need to be engaged from the beginning and be a part of the design process so that you know there's a buyer at the end of it, and the buyer understands why the credit is structured the way it is and how the MRV works. And perhaps through this more engaged design process, there's room for more qualitative indicators as well as quantitative indicators. Maybe there's process-based indicators as well. And I think it reduces the risk, of course, of the communities developing the credits, that there is going to be a buyer at the end of it. And this is something I'd love to be a part of. So thank you for sharing that, Gregory.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the idea of co-learning, the idea of stepping back and saying, at least for Regen, this is one of the things that I've been, the creative potential of different actors coming together, buyers and sellers, land stewards, project developers, verifiers, and kind of like playing and being a little bit more playful, because the eco credit, carbon credit, biodiversity credits, like the space tends to be so claustrophobically serious and it's so counterproductive for learning, I feel like, right? People get so like focused on this right way, and I just feel like actually if we just take a step back and have fun and turn it into a creative, experimental, collaborative storytelling process where people are just kind of like taking a crack at something wild and wonderful and getting feedback about that, I feel like what is going to emerge out of that is going to blow all of our minds. Like there's going to be new approaches to verification. There's going to be new approaches to unitization. There's going to be new approaches that actually land for buyers because they can see the process as well and they can participate, right, as part of the process. And in that participation, both sides learn from each other. So, anyway, I feel like it's going to be kind of fun to just explode things out and have a
My
contest.
observation is that the kinds of tools people are using and the way they use the tools is ready to change, because it's like, I don't think like Twitter Spaces and podcasts, for example. I'm like, that was, I think podcast was fine like the last couple years, but now like this kind of collaborative design together thing. I've had some good experience. There's some like sticky note like collaborative tools, and I also am not sure. I think it needs to be visual, so I don't think it can be on a Twitter Spaces. And I've organized over 100 events. This includes hackathons, conferences, workshops, roadshows over the last 15 years. And like the designing an event is a really special craft. Like who should be there, how it's framed, what you say in the beginning, like how you get people, how you talk to people. There's a lot of magic in how you do that. And like I think there's an opportunity here to kind of redesign how people come together virtually. Samantha, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, just wanted to agree with Gregory and also agree with you, Rex. I think there's so much room for creativity in the credit design space. And I think the carbon markets right now are begging for disruption and a different way of doing things that connects the buyers, the people providing the capital at the end of the day for these projects to understand what's needed on the ground. And I think there have been so many entities in the middle really trying to turn this into a standardized commodity. And that hasn't worked, because what you're trying to do while you're, wanting to sequester carbon or avoid carbon emissions, and the science of that has to be robust, and carbon is fungible. The actual activities that are happening on the ground are happening in a very unique sociocultural and bioregional context. And that has to be taken into account. And there's not a one size fits all approach. So I think bringing together the buyers and the communities and the technical experts that can support them in that credit design process could yield much better results than we've seen so far.
Awesome. Um, I want to just take a moment to invite Will, who's in the audience, because I was recognizing that over the, as we've been talking about eco weaving and reflecting on that experience a little bit, ReFi Summit, reflecting on that experience a little bit. Also, Will at Regen Foundation was over at the Collaborative Finance gathering that was hosted at the Crypto Commons Hub in Austria. And I'm just really curious to hear how that went, because it's like there's these multiple communities and spaces all talking about adjacent themes and topics and gathering, and I'm just curious, what were your takeaways, and how does that fit into the sort of larger thread of the conversation that we're having today on this spaces?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Gregory. Yeah, so I just got back from a 10-day trip to Austria. Um, the the gathering, so collaborative finance is this term that Ethan Buckman has been using and some other people have been using in the space. There's a lot of something fi terms at this point. Of course, we're all familiar with ReFi and DeFi, and now there's this CoFi. Collaborative finance is tapping into the rich history around credit based money, or mesh credit, or mutual credit. Um, there's a lot of people who have been working in this field for a long time, both on the local currency front as well as on the regional industrial credit clearing front. There was this paper that came out, I think, in 2021 on essentially liquidity savings mechanisms. So a bunch of it gets into some technical financial applications, but they have very significant real world impacts, where if you can get a community of people to agree to use some kind of mutual credit mechanism, then you don't need cash or currency or liquidity in order to have the economy functioning. And this is just due to the simple fact that most entities operate at a cash neutral basis. Your kind of inflows and outflows roughly match up. So you can use this to really cut down on complexity.
Wait, are you saying we can replace money with trust, Will?
So yeah, I mean, so the I guess to zoom out a little bit here, uh, money always begins and ends with people. There's, even though we talk about payments for ecosystem services or commodities or other abstractions like these, ultimately they are abstractions. Money always begins and ends with people, and there's two basic theories on how to conceptualize this. One is the commodity theory, where you have things like gold and other kinds of assets. And the other is the credit theory, which says you always start out by someone doing something for someone else, developing a credit debit relationship, and going from there. So I'm happy if people want to ask me some more questions about this, but the gathering, there were 60 of us there, and probably half from the kind of crypto side of things. Ethic Hub was there, which is doing some great work with coffee growers. Circles Universal Basic Income was there. I wrote a whole post on this that both the foundation and myself tweeted out. I can share it in the comments here afterwards. And then there were a whole bunch of local currency, regional credit clearing system people there. So people who have absolutely nothing to do with crypto, but are interested in on the ground impacts. And the question, the kind of space of exploration was, okay, we're both ultimately working to do some of the same things, improve real world outcomes through innovations in how we look at money. So why don't we collaborate on this?
Amazing. So, just off the top of my head, I'm curious. Would you consider, there in Regen Network, we talk about two different main types of credits, or like maybe I would say families of credits. It's probably the right way to sort of classify them, is a taxonomy. There's sort of two families of credits that we're thinking about. One family is outcome credits, which I think clearly are following the commodity theory of money and value, where there's an outcome that has value for someone and they're paying for it and taking credit for it. And in order to use it, you sort of retire that. And that's the classic, for instance, carbon credits. It's sort of it's this attempt to make public goods kind of into a commodity. And then the other family of eco credits that are explored commonly in our community are stewardship credits, where you're creating an agreement about a specific stewardship approach that may or likely will result in an outcome that could be, I guess, commodified or turned into a unitized in some way. But it also might have holistic intrinsic value and sort of represent a trust relationship, or sort of would you, I'm sort of thinking out loud, but do you think those two classifications track or match? Is it useful to think about how those two families of eco credits relate to these two theories of money?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Gregory. So there were some monetary theorists giving some presentations on the kind of whole historical background to all this, and it really comes down to commodity-based credits are based on an ownership paradigm, when credit-based approaches are based on a contract, so contractual trust-based paradigm. So I think that's a great example.
And are there examples of these two sorts of systems? Because in our world, there are like stewardship credits, and I actually really love this framing. Stewardship credits clearly can have a contract for future rights to an outcome, like an option or a convertibility, um, in which a certain number of those stewardship credits could convert into an outcome credit. Are there examples like that of systems specifically designed to? I know this happens emergently because you can trade like kind of mutual credit for gold, for instance, so that, so markets can kind of like fuse these two approaches. But I guess what I'm asking is, were any examples that where there's like a conscious fusion or design between these two systems um, brought up during the Ko-Fi conference?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is that you always need some amount of liquidity in the system, because you're never going to have an absolutely perfect balance across individuals or across an entire economy. So, although there's a lot of cool things you can do with these liquidity savings mechanisms, you don't get to a zero commodity basis. You always have some amount of this kind of commodity backing in the system to address imbalances or to address full participation. But yes, there's that there have been some examples that were shared there about essentially having some kind of backing to spin up a system in the first place, and then have credit available from that point forward. So there are some local currency systems that work in this way, that there is both a kind of cash input component that you put dollars in and get local dollars out, and you have a credit line in the system. So I, I think these things work well together.
So I'm just feeling like, Rex was kind of reminding us to use intuition and to follow energy and, like kind of trust that these convenings and events um, can guide us and sort of chart something like a 3-year kind of roadmap where we're outlining what are the big topics or places where we need to be working. And I'm curious, just in this conversation and in what you learned in Ko-Fi, and I know what you've been holding recently, just in terms of thinking about how we're going to, as a community, be reinventing regen token economics, and this sort of analogy or relationship between steward credits and outcome credits, and the need for some amount of liquidity in a system, but also the need to have efficient credit clearing so that people can just trust each other and get to work and create a functional economy around sort of shared interests. I'm curious if you just have any sort of intuitions around the types of things that we really need to be working on for designing Regen Network's 2.0 version of token economics.
Well, so far, I guess our token economics has not yet been looking into the credit side of things, but I think
and by credit side of things, you mean like mutual credit,
yes.
like
Yes.
credit, like loaning, lending contract.
Yep.
Right. Great.
So as far as where the thinking is going on the token, though, I guess one thing that it would be worth calling out to the community here is there's been a lot of discussion about the possibility of a tokenomics DAO, that for this process to work, there needs to be kind of a dedicated working group, and that working group could have its own groups account on Regen ledger with its own assets, bridged USDC or other things like that to be able to pay for things. So I think there's a kind of a workflow aspect of the token design. So I think that's one thing that's just a very pragmatic next step in this process. And then on the other side, I guess the thinking is, let's get something simple out sooner rather than later and iterate from there, rather than having some massive idea that's going to take years to implement.
Great. Thank you, Will. Thanks for sharing those thoughts. And hey, Rez, I see you hopping on. We're actually, I think, going to just start wrapping things up. Rez, I invoked you and your DGen economics slideshow from ReFi Summit. Just want to say, share quick gratitude. Rex, do you have any closing words? I see you're off.
I just think sometimes it's helpful to have a core organizing analogy for like, I'm just listening between the lines to what you're saying. And the analogy that I walked away was Bretton Woods for economic token design. Because it's like, it's like Bretton Woods, like you host a conference like that when everything has changed in the structure of the world. You got monetary system, international relations, and you walk out of there with a Bretton Woods system of how the world works post Bretton Woods. And like it sounds like the combination of people you want there with like token design, economics, like the stakeholders. I think it feels like a Bretton Woods of eco tokens is the term that came to mind. I could be wrong. That's all I had to say.
Nice. Like leaving it there. So just want to end by sharing gratitude to all the speakers. Samantha, thanks for hopping up. Rex, thank you. Will, thanks as always. David, thank you for hosting. And sorry you had Twitter glitchiness. I hear that's been going around a little bit. And thanks for everybody out in the audience. As always, feel free to sort of chime in, request speaker, and in the future. Right now, we're going to be wrapping up. But thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to Regenerati News Hour. Again, we do this every 2 weeks now. We shifted from weekly to bi-weekly, and they're always fun conversations. So really enjoy it always. So see you all in 2 weeks on Twitter, and see you in between. As we all continue to work on this big vision together. So thank you.